Hello and welcome to this presentation on Making Rights Real, which enables civil society to engage local government on systemic challenges to water and sanitation services using human rights. The approach was developed by a group of organizations and is available for free. There is a link and further information at the end of the presentation. First, you will hear an introduction to Making Rights Real, followed by experiences with using it from Ethiopia, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. Making Rights Real was developed to make human rights relevant and useful for local government officials. 10 years ago, the human rights to water and sanitation were recognized. This has changed perspectives. People now have rights to these services, and governments are responsible for realizing these rights. In practice, this task usually falls to local government. But there are challenges: a lack of resources, political interference, or competing priorities, for example. In developing Making Rights Real, we were convinced that human rights can help tackle some of these challenges, for example, by bringing in a focus on overcoming inequalities. The approach has so far been used in 12 countries by 37 organizations. Experiences indicate impacts at 3 levels: on civil society implementers, on local government officials, and on WASH services. Making Rights Real can be used by anyone who works with local government. It combines materials that show how human rights can inform local action with a process of constructive engagement between civil society and local government officials. Typically, a larger civil society organization introduces Making Rights Real to local civil society organizations. These organizations then engage local government officials. First, they identify so-called would-be heroes, officials who are open to change, and then they engage these would-be heroes in a series of conversations guided by the Making Rights Real materials and questionnaires. Challenges are discussed, solutions identified, and plans made. These conversations are informed by human rights and seek to support the agency and capacity of local government officials to act. This process supports a constructive working relationship between local government officials as duty bearers and civil society. And I just want to add, as the corona pandemic is on everyone's minds at the moment, that this type of working relationship is really important in emergency response as well. Next, you will hear from civil society implementers themselves.
Yeah, we use the Making Rights Real tool in one region, particularly called Oromia, and which has a very low coverage and very high non-functional schemes. Government in that and staff in that region and in that district was said to be very much demotivated. Our focus in the rollout of the Making Rights Real started from supporting government to understand their role and responsibility, be able to do better analysis of their context, plan better, and improve implementation and monitoring. One additional component was the motivation mapping that looks at what motivates and demotivates people in government, how they perceive their role versus what their real mandate and responsibility is, and also the capacity to deliver and the different accountability mechanisms. What are the lessons? What we learned from that process is that we will create more user capacity through this process, and people are able to demand better services. Incentives will be also considered, as government will have more motivation. All services and capacity support need to align with understanding, motivation, and capacity levels. As a way forward, we want to incorporate the Making Rights Real tool into all our districts initiative. We want to track government staff motivation and invest on a comprehensive capacity building plan. We have a number of testimonies from government staff on this approach. they said that the tool have made them take ownership of the wash service situation in their area, seek feedback and improve planning and monitoring processes.
Hello everyone. Making Rights Real approach was introduced in Bangladesh to transform human rights from a high-level recognition to local practice. Bangladesh government has voted in favor of UN resolution that recognizes water and sanitation as a human right. The government has also pledged to achieve clean water and sanitation for all by 2030. However, there is a very limited practice of these high-level commitments at local level. Knowledge gap in translating human rights principles to local context still exists. There are challenges in mobilizing financial and human resources. For example, no separate budget line item for WASH, lack of collaboration and coordination among departments providing IWRM and WASH services, limited use of government's subsidy for ultra-poor, and very limited scope for participation of women and excluded groups. Making Rights Real was used in Simavi's WASH SDG and watershed programs implemented through local partners STORB and SLOB. The tools and guidelines were introduced to the local government officials, and they also shared their experience and opinion with us on how to improve WASH services for all. Starting from increasing the participation of women and excluded groups in decision-making process and increasing the sustainability of WASH services. One of the local government officials was also willing to know more about human rights and their application. On the other hand, Mayor of Amtali municipality was keen to use and adopt MRR guideline in their planning and monitoring. As a result of this, understanding, collaboration, and confidence have increased among the local government officials. It helped local government understand better about human rights to water and sanitation, and also it was used to increase the collaboration, which gave them a role clarity of different departments. Officials gained confidence in practicing human rights to water and sanitation, especially focusing on leaving no one behind. Union Parishad allocated separate WASH budget for women, PWD, and marginalized groups. Lastly, there is also scope to scale up WASH programming through using MRR approach in Bangladesh.
In Bhutan, SND uses Making Rights Real to strengthen local government and WASH stakeholder application of human rights principles within the National Rural Sanitation and Hygiene Program. Making Rights Real is applied as one of the strategies to reach last mile households, groups, and individuals to realize the human right to water and sanitation of all. Building on the government of Bhutan's commitment to the human right to water and sanitation, SND Bhutan, in partnership with the Ministry of Health and as part of SND's Sustainable Sanitation and Hygiene for All program, we apply Making Rights Real in the 4 districts as shown on the map in collaboration with our knowledge partner ISF and funded by the Australian government's Water for Women Fund. One of the main challenges that we are trying to overcome using the Making Rights Real approach is to influence local government leaders to prioritize resource allocation for sanitation together with water and to ensure adequate resources to address the sanitation needs of households and groups that fall in the last mile category. Together, we formed a national team of intersectoral stakeholders with shared sanitation and hygiene aspirations. We mobilized the participation of the Ministry of Health and the disability persons organization Ability Bhutan Society. We engaged ISF's expertise to broaden the team's understanding of the human right to water and sanitation and strengthen capacity to incorporate human rights and WASH activities in 2019. These efforts led to the development of a joint implementation and adaptive programming framework within the government's National Rural Sanitation and Hygiene Program. Steps that we've taken so far include strengthening knowledge and capacity of local government officials on the principles of the human rights, water, and sanitation, the identification of 24 would-be heroes from our local government officials with a good mix of gender, age, and positions through the conduct of inclusive baseline assessments. All resources are undergoing translation for accessibility and to ensure their continued use beyond the SND project. Guiding questions related to the five human rights principles have also been developed to assist in the one to one discussions for the national team. These would be followed up and complemented by continuous monitoring and follow up as part of our regular monitoring. So far, our efforts have strengthened partnership between center and local governments. Stakeholder engagement with and exposure to Making Rights Real have enhanced stakeholders' capacity to implement more inclusive and participatory WASH activities. Most importantly, without being experts on human rights, the Making Rights Real approach has made all stakeholders put in a conscious effort to ensure the right to sanitation for all.